sure I wasn't able to kind of make decisions and stand by them. I had a really deep sense of sort of imposter syndrome. My confidence sort of plummeted. I was kind of questioning myself, things that I was doing.
Because the moment I was like, no, I'm not going on payroll, I need to invoice. They were like, all right, let's add. I had my child at 16. So I was more like, no, I can't do that. They're like, Charles, why is everything wrong with you? You're holding a baby and holding an infant.
And I spent the money on the offices and we were getting it all kitted out and we had a launch and everything. And literally within 4 weeks, the turnover plummeted. And I kept thinking next month it'll be better and started plowing in money to keep the business going, to keep the staff on.
I didn't really have that much money. I had my savings, but I don't come from a family of privilege. I come from a West Coast family. So I had all of these kind of barriers that at the time I didn't realize were barriers. I just got on with it and just moved. I moved without thinking. I had an idea.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur Stories, where I'm joined by phenomenal women from all around the world who share their successes, their challenges, the highs and the lows of being an entrepreneur. As usual, if you haven't already pressed that subscribe or follow button, make sure that you do that now so that you don't miss out when I release a new interview. And if you're not already following on social media, get following. On Instagram, I'm at She's the Boss UK. On Twitter, at She's the Boss INTL. I'm on LinkedIn, Daniela Genus. And on Facebook, Daniela Genus, She's the Boss. Today, as usual, I say this every week, but I mean it every week I say it. I'm really excited because I'm joined by Heneka Watkis-Porter, who is from Jamaica. So everybody that kind of pays attention to this knows that I am a proud British-born Jamaican. I always rep for Jamaica. So I get especially excited when I'm joined by somebody from my home island. So Heneka, thank you for joining us. So Heneka, just to give a bit of information, podcast queen, interviewed the likes of Lisa Nichols, Lee Dumas, Seth Godin. Heneka, you produce top-rated podcasts for corporations. You train entrepreneurs in podcasting. Tell us more about you, your journey, and what you do, and more importantly, how you got into it.
Well, okay. So first of all, thank you so much, Daniela. Thank you for having me on and thank you for the work that you do. I know that it takes a lot to create a podcast, and to stick with it. And you're at 90 odd episodes. So, that is commendable. And so I, really commend you for that. Now, about me and all these things that I've been doing and what led me into it and all of that. So I've always been entrepreneurial at heart, I believe, from growing up selling apples at at the front of my yard. Didn't even think about it much until recently I realized, hey, but you've been an entrepreneur for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And so I started with a clothing brand, which actually, after a while, I recognized that it was like more of a means to an end rather than the end in itself. So what I was doing, it was opening doors for me to speak, for me to write and so on. And I found deeper meaning in doing that than I did the actual business per se. Mm-hmm. The clothing line, which was Patwa Apparel, and putting an interpretation in English to the Jamaican expressions that I would have on them. And so one thing led to another. I started doing radio at some point in 2014, I think it was. And then after that, I kind of said, you know what? I want this to be a podcast. I want to reach more people. And in wanting to reach more people, in 2017, the Entrepreneurial You Podcast edition was launched. And since then, I've not looked back. Instead, what I've been doing is coaching. I've written the book on it, Podcast for the Quick Start Guide to Launching and Leveling Up Your Brand. I do workshops. I know I produce podcasts for other organizations. So I am all in while I'm podcasting and enjoying the journey. Sometimes it's a challenging one, sometimes I really don't feel like doing anything, to be frank, but then I remember why I'm doing it. And that in and of itself keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Mm-hmm. So when you kind of decided to launch the podcast, how did you go about finding your first guests and how did you kind of frame how you'd pitch it? Was that a nerve-wracking experience?
All right. So actually my first guest was never aired. And it was interesting because this guest, I was part of a group on Facebook, and I thought he would have been ideal because at this time I was excited and learning about podcasting and doing research on, all the things that I should do and not do. And I thought this person was very vocal about it and he would be an awesome guest. Of course, we did an interview, and that interview, for some reason, my computer went down. I deleted my files from my drive, and try as I may, I couldn't get it back. I tried to get a software, to restore those files. I think most files were restored, and still that to date, that one has not been found. And I thought, you know what, everything happens for a reason. I tried to get another interview with him. Didn't quite sound so thrilled about it. Eventually, I think when he had something to promote, he reached out to me to say, hey, let's do that interview again. We scheduled the interview, and he came on that day. When he came on the day, I don't know, like in the middle of it, he just jumped off, like, to say, he'll be right back. There's something important that came up. And to this day, we've never had it. He never got back to me. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm grateful that it never happened, because this is not somebody I really want to promote. If you're going to be as disrespectful as that, not honoring somebody with your word, so that didn't happen. But suffice it to say, doing that first interview was very nerve-wracking. Like I didn't know what to say. My scripting was like, I didn't quite have it together. And so when it didn't happen, it was like, okay, that was just a test run for your real interview. And so my real first interview was now with John Lee Dumas. And we know John Lee is the creme de la creme of podcasting, right? I was introduced to him by a friend here in Jamaica when I told her about my idea of wanting to start a podcast, and she introduced him to me in terms of, his content, not directly, but his content. And I fell in love. Like, it was really literally love at first sight. It was like two others in addition to John Lee that she had recommended that I started listening to, which I didn't quite get involved deeply in the other two, but I began to, and this is my strategy to answer your question, Daniela, that what I did was I developed a relationship, online with John Lee Dumas. And so in developing that relationship, I was really, thrilled about what he was doing. I was really into it, consuming his content, engaging with him. So when I was ready for an ask, I was already visible, being in his presence, being, in his groups, and just somebody who engages with him from a authentic standpoint. And so when I made the ask, it was easy for him to say yes.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's making me feel a little bit ashamed, because I have been listening to your podcast, and in one of them, I remember you specifically saying that you should make sure you engage with people, make sure that you leave comments and write in the show notes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't done that.
No, it's all right. I mean, there are other ways to do it. I mean, you're from Jamaica. Well, you're of Jamaican descent. So, we say that there are many ways to skin a cat, right? So,
well, I came to find when I interviewed Ife, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wanted to interview Heneka. And she's like, yeah, we're sister friends. I was like,
like when she was telling me about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, believe me, I am the most, one of the most, I don't know how to describe it, but I don't have any airs about me, like absolutely none. I don't get caught up in positions, titles, that kind of a thing. You see, I was doing some writing and I realized, oh my gosh, it's time for an interview. And I'm good coming on like that. It's just a show that I really believe that I'm the most genuine, authentic person you ever met, because I don't get carried away with the whole social media hype and stuff, and all that. I don't. I try to stay grounded. So anybody reaches out to me, I respond. I mean, there are times when, to be honest, persons reach out and they're reaching out with a request and stuff. And I'm getting to the stage now where I honestly cannot always respond. But for the most part, even in social media, if you come in my DM or wherever it is, I show I dignify people, because I know what it feels like to feel like, you're being ignored, and oh, I'm not at that level or something, and I try not to let people feel that way, because I haven't arrived. There's just so much more for me to do. And as part of the journey, if I can help one person along the way, then it would have been meaningful for me.
I love that. And you're helping many people along the way. Obviously, you mentioned the book, and I can see it strategically positioned on the shelf behind you. Well done. So writing the book, I assume that the motivation was to reach more people and then to be able to kind of share your expertise. What was that process like of actually sitting down, writing, and then seeing it published? That must have been a beautiful experience.
Right. So the motivation, yeah, as you said, really to help more people, but it came from a strategy from day one with the podcast. Because when I started podcasting, when you say to in Jamaica, I have a podcast, I'm like, huh? What are you talking about? So I was very deliberate in wanting to be the Jamaican podcast queen. I saw what was happening with JLD and all these other successful podcasters. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, here's a missed opportunity that we're not taking, advantage of. And so I was deliberate in that I set out to go on TV, radio, in the press, and just share podcasting. I've been featured on it. I did many interviews on the subject in traditional media. So I was deliberate in setting myself out to be the podcast queen. And so in order to be the podcast queen, because I know history can be unkind, because we live in a society that is classist. Jamaica is still a classist society, and colorism is a big deal. And and who has the most followers, we're still the fake metrics still hold high in this in our society. And the fake metrics, people get to say, not to say that they're not valid, celebrities and good at what they do, but when you've been given you've been dealt a certain kind of a hand, and so you get to skip some places ahead, yeah. Pretty much. And I know that is going to be people are going to start podcasting eventually, and nobody's going to remember that I was the evangelist, and I was very deliberate in doing all of these things. Like, hello, you got to wake up, you got to take notice, because I did it, right? And I wanted to get that. I mean, how important is all that much credit? I'm not so sure, but I know that it does, because my thing has always been, what is going to be your legacy? What is it that people remember you for? And we all want to be remembered for something. And I want to be remembered for, making podcasting what it is in Jamaica. So in being and wanting to cement myself in that position, so some of the things that I did, I made sure that I was doing workshops. I was teaching people how to do it. I was doing one-on-one coaching. And I thought to myself, okay, that's fine. But after the course, and I also have an online course, but after the course, what happens next? I need to have something in print, something tangible in print that, again, cement as part of the process of cementing myself in that position. Now, what was the process like, Daniela? Okay. So a lot of the content I had already written somewhere, somehow, whether a blog post or something, or given a speech, or, a talk, or, wherever it was, International Podcast Day or something of the sort. So when that happened, when I was doing that, I thought to myself, okay, when I decided to write the book, I thought, you know what, I'm going to write a book about podcasting in November. No, November is National Writers Month, something. I don't remember the full National Writers Month. I'm getting twisted here. So whatever it is, it's called. I know I've missed out some letters in the abbreviation there, but I thought, yeah, the podcasting book is going to be the project that I'm going to work on for that month. I'm going to set myself a deadline. I'm a target in 1 month. I will write this book. So I remember going to some retreat with my friend, that we're going to be off. And we say, this is relaxation and writing time. And believe me, before you know it, the middle of November, the boat had passed, and I'd perhaps just written just one little verbiage about what the book is going to be, but had not written anything. And then I said to myself, oh my gosh, but I remember that I have all this content in the form of blog posts and, and the videos that I could transcribe. So I started, so like 50% of the content I had already had somewhere, or perhaps even more than that. And so I spent the rest of November organizing it. By January, and what propelled me actually to complete it in January, because I was really going slow. I was tired and worn out. I was going through a period of depression at some point, and then early January I had a very life threatening experience, and all of those things, like, oh my gosh, I was so tired and drained. But what propelled me to do it was, I think early on in the year, I was supposed to be speaking. I spoke at the ATD Technology Conference in California, and that's one of the biggest technology conferences globally. And when the organizers reach out to me and say, "Hey, we're gonna have a bookstore. Would you like your book to be in the library? Do you have a book that you want to be in the store?" I'm like, "Yeah, not library, store. Do you have a book that you want to be in the store?" I'm like, "Hell yeah." Uh, no, this book was not finished. Remember that, right?
Wow.
So of course that motivated me. Like, what an opportunity! I'm not gonna let that pass me by. So I just finished the book and made sure that I got great cover. And, I spent nights and days just finalizing the book and making it what it is. And I'm really very proud of it. And now we have it has distributed. I've gained a distributor. So in addition to it being on Amazon, I now have a distributor for that book, which is going to take it places that I couldn't possibly take it on my own. So I'm really, really proud of that. I'm a 5 times author, but I think of all the work, I think my book number one is what I'm proud of, maybe the most, because it got me started. But with everything, when you do it for the first time and you look back on some things, you're like, oh my God, you cringe, yeah. Like some of those things are really cringe worthy. But so I'm proud of it for that sense that it got me started. But what I'm really, really proud about is my 5th book, which is the one that I spend a lot more time in, not necessarily in terms of length of time, but in terms of making sure that I didn't do the formatting myself. I didn't do the cover myself or try to do it. I mean, the first one was kind of a semi self-published, because I got like a publishing house to do a lot of the things. But the other two, the others in between 1 and 5, it was all self-published and again, cringeworthy in many areas. But book number 5 is what I'm most proud of, because I did get professional help. I focused on doing what I wanted to do, get the content out and let the formatters do their work and let the book cover designers do their thing. And I'm very, very proud of the outcome.
Well done. Well done. As you speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, what a great idea. So I've been saying I'm going to write a book about business since 2013. I've been trying to write this book and keep starting and stopping. But I never actually considered just transcribing a lot of my content. So thank you for that. And I love the fact that you said, right, in this month, I'm going to get it done. My commitment, and I've made this public, is that it has to be done by the end of the year. So I'm going to share that with you as well. So I'm having this kind of public accountability, because if it's not done, I can't take shame. So I don't want anybody to come and
Where's the book? Where's the book?
Yeah. So I'm being very vocal, but thank you. I think that's really great, great advice. And I recognize strategically how important it can be to kind of solidify you as an expert in your field.
Absolutely.
Having a book can be. So that's one of the reasons I want to do it. So thank you for sharing that, because
and if you want, I mean, I have clients that I have training, clients that I coach for podcasting and for business too, that are actual publishers, and they help you along the journey. So if you need resources, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes, I do, and no, I will not. So you touched upon it when you was just explaining there that you had some health issues previously. One of the things that I've been talking about with a lot of women is this idea of burnout and kind of the implications of burnout. And I know in one of the podcasts that I heard you speaking about adrenal fatigue and kind of having that extreme kind of crash. And it's something that I think is so important for women, for entrepreneurs just generally, to kind of be informed about, so that we don't grind ourselves into the ground and get sick on the back of it. So can you tell us a little bit more and kind of how you've managed to rebuild yourself to be able to keep pushing forward?
Thank you for that question. I like when I get the opportunity, Daniela, to talk about this, because we've been fed a lot of lies about hustle and grind and why we need to go. And in between all of that, we are not hearing the punctuation of your health is wealth. Slow down and live, which is my new message.
Mm-hmm.
And today, as we're recording this podcast, it's 1 year to the date when I had my most frightening experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. April 1, 2020. I was actually in the middle. It was 8 p.m. By that time, I'd done so many things for the day. I had interviews after interviews, both for my podcast and both as podcast guests. And I felt tired, but I thought, yeah, I'm just going to do this last thing and I'll be fine after. Well, that was not to be. While I was doing that interview at 8 p.m. Jamaican time, live video interview, I'm passing out.
Mm-hmm.
And if I told you that I was passing out and I sat down, lay down for a minute and then drank some water or drank something sweet and I recovered, that would have been fine. Frightening, but fine. No. The middle of I went to lay down and then all of a sudden I find myself experiencing some, I don't know, I cannot explain what it was, but all I knew I was seeing an online doctor at the time at that night because somebody had recommended. I couldn't go out to my regular doctor. There was curfew, pandemic is on, curfew. From there went downhill, a whole host of disaster. So I'm having lots of panic attack. I'm depressed. I'm not sleeping. I am passing out frequently. Just a myriad of things that happen. Going to over 10 doctors, and it wasn't until my 11th doctor. And after I have myself done quite a number of, spent a number of hours researching online, it was adrenal fatigue. No, adrenal fatigue is not something that a typical general practitioner is going to put their finger on. They're going to tell you, oh, it's in your head, or it's not real, or it could be anything, but you know what you're feeling. And thankfully, I was listening to what was happening to me on the inside. I was listening to my spirit to tell me no. That each time I went to a doctor and they said X, I just knew that was putting plaster on the sore, but it wasn't really getting to the root of it. So with all of that, and I'm still in the process, full disclosure, still in the process of recovery. It was the worst of times, but it was the best of time because it had got me to a place where, although I think I was, somebody who knew what I wanted before and knew what I stood for and all of that, I thought I was all that person. But more now than ever, what I have been able to do is to say no to a lot of things, to just be me, to not be on anybody's clock, but to recognize my own timing, what works for me. Don't put myself under stressful situations, eat on time, eat healthily, do all the right things that will help me. Because before I was hustling and grinding and I wasn't stopping. I was doing all these things. I told you that I had a near-death experience in January of 2020, right? As if that was not enough. And even in that period, I was just going, and my brain didn't even get a chance to process what was happening, right? Mm-hmm. I had an accidental drug overdose. Mm-hmm. And that was so frightening. Like it was one of the most traumatic times in my life. And I've been trauma. I know trauma, but that, and then a few months after that in April, to be facing that other crisis, which I was so fearful, like nothing meant anything to me. I sit in my office with all these things around me and all the accolades on the wall and everything. And I resented every flipping thing because I thought to myself, had I not been pursuing all of these things, I would have been fine. I mean, months have passed and you have now put it into perspective that it wasn't the things, it was just how you were not managing yourself and taking care of you that led you there. So don't blame anything. But at the time, that's how I felt. And so for me, in addition to the pursuit of what we determine and decide success is, my true measure of success is how I feel each day when I get up. How much self-care I did that day, what I did to take care of me, what I did to check in with myself, because we're talking about entrepreneurship and all of these things and, being the boss and all of these things, Daniela, but we have to take time to check in with ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. I just posted on Facebook this morning that, it's actually 1 month to the day that all of this happened. I know by the time this podcast airs, it would have been outside of that 1 year. But I just talked about what it has taught me, and just how at the time when everything else was happening, the pandemic was at its peak almost at that time, or was just coming into, full swing at that time. And particularly in Jamaica in March, we just had our first case. So the world also was seeing the brutality and the whole outcry of Black Lives Matter because of what happened with George Floyd. And all of those things, to me, I was numb to them. I couldn't feel them. You know why? Because I was busy trying to stay alive. I was busy trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with me going through all of this. So it has taught me a lot, and it has taught me that, first of all, I matter most. Self-care is most important. If it's not purpose driven, I'm going to ignore it. If it's something minor, I'm not majoring in it, and it has taught me just so many lessons. And I want us to pause, and I want your listeners to pause and to understand that, pursuing success as the world knows it, pursuing success as in terms of material gain is good, and we should all be seeking after that. But it should not come at the expense of our health and our well-being, right? Checking with yourself no more than ever. You see, the world has always, in every single one of us, has always been faced with a situation that is trying, that is, that is stretching us. We've always been faced with that, but we were all kind of blinded to the fact that everybody's going through something. We're all blinded to that reality. But you know what? We can no longer be blinded to that reality that everybody's faced with something, because the pandemic has taught us that everybody's going through something, and we're all going through this one same thing at the very same time. Let alone the other things that you may not know, that I may not know that you're going through, and that we don't know each other is going through that. So we have to give each other grace. We have to check in with ourselves and our mental health, feel things. I was always somebody who, I've been through so many things, and I've always seen myself as an overcomer. So I just go on to the next thing. Something happens, and I'm like, okay, moving right along, next. That's my personality. Entrepreneurship has turned me into that person. But no, I no longer get in that zone of, okay, next. I pause. I cry if I have to. I cry when I have to. If I feel sad, I don't pass it off and say, okay, I'm strong. I accept it. I checking with myself. This is how I'm feeling now. Am I going to dwell on it? No. But I recognize this is what I'm feeling now, and call a spade, do whatever step is necessary, and process it and move from there. But don't just ignore it, because over time, all of this can just come back and be so overwhelming to you that you crash and burn.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I cannot stress enough how important those words that you shared are. There's so many of us that are really buying into this hustle, rest when you're dead culture, and it's so damaging and can have long-term impact. And so many of us are not aware of that. I know quite a few people that suffer with ME, fibromyalgia, which is all kind of around the same thing, and it's onset by extended periods of stress. And we put our bodies into that extended period of stress and then don't expect it to come and do anything to us in the long term. And then when it does, then it's like, oh my gosh, as you said, we're looking around and was it really worth it? If it's going to change my life in the negative for an extended period of time. And I really want anyone listening, anybody watching, to really understand exactly what Heneka has said about health is wealth. I'm a very, very big proponent of rest, rejuvenation. And I think that one of the kind of key tenets for me of being an entrepreneurial success is also having good well-being practices, because what is the point? You achieve it all, but you can't benefit from it because you've been striving, going, and then you drop dead from a heart attack at 50. And that's something that we don't want for anyone. So take heed, listen, stop yourself. I always say schedule in rest, because I think that's so important, and make yourself a priority above the business, because there's no business if there's no you. And that's really important.
Well said.
Thank you. So I want to talk more about Jamaica because I just like talking about Jamaica.
Ah.
So growing up in the Caribbean, are there any kind of key things or kind of key cultural experiences that have really kind of colored how you've approached entrepreneurship, how you operate in kind of the entrepreneurial space?
I think fundamentally because we are like creativity is in our DNA, right? And at one of that's the good thing and the bad thing. And here's why it's good for me. Because there's always an idea to be pursued. We're not short on ideas, for me, being in Jamaica and seeing, particularly in Jamaica, and seeing the language and just the culture in general, and how persons overseas have this affinity towards Jamaican culture. When I look at how small we are, the last when I used to do a lot of research on this, I think we were 0.004% of the entire world's population. And when you look at our impact, so for me, that's the load, and that is what actually led to the starting of my first business, right? But also this creativity too, because we're so full of ideas, and I guess it's people in general, but I think because we're surrounded with all the tenants that would make your creative juices flow. So the sunshine and the beaches and the trees and the mountains and all of these things that put you in that space to be creative, we find ourselves having so many ideas and kind of bent out of shape in terms of not knowing which one to pursue. And sometimes we want to pursue them all. And in wanting to pursue them all, there are many bright, shiny objects that come along and distract us from the main thing. So that, where so I'm saying, whereas the creativity is good for us, it is also one of the things that we have to manage carefully. And particularly because as an entrepreneur, I've had to learn to be more focused, because focus doesn't come naturally to me, right? I get distracted with the next best idea that I think, oh, this is going to be the next big thing. And, you want to pursue that. But it has, I've been reminded to pause each time, and I have to check in with myself and remind myself that I have to pause and I have to, pursue what is aligned to my purpose, and not just because something is good. Not because it's a good idea means, it should be pursued. Maybe it's not you to pursue it. Maybe it's for somebody else.
Yes, no, that's for sure. Yeah, focus is important, but yeah, I generally I'll call myself an innovator or an expert in innovation. So I often have lots of different ideas, and I really have to prioritize and not fall foul to this shiny object syndrome and jumping from one thing to the next. You speak about the sun being a motivator. Oh, how I miss the sun and the beach. And I think one of the challenges for me in particular is operating in a place where we don't have much sun and there's not really much beach. So my long-term goal is to be able to do half of the time in Jamaica and half the time here, so I can get my sun replenish my vitamin D and kind of get those creative juices reflowing. Because I think that's really important.
I was actually saying to somebody, I put it on my status the other day that, the sun is the sun is like the best thing for a depressive state of mind, because I remember, like I shared with you that I'm in that moment where I'm processing things. I'm not allowing things to just slide, and I'm processing, and in processing, some things are really depressing. And I remember just the other day, it's like, I'm falling into this depression. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I literally go outside, sit in the sun for about 30 minutes. I mean, covered up and stuff. Sat in the sun for about 30 minutes. And I kid you not, I came out of the sun and all that depressive feeling just left me, and it's, I think there's a name for it, why it's SAD, which seasonal affective disorder.
Yes.
So persons like, who are living in the UK and in Canada, where it's always cold for the most part. Yeah. Like, yeah, you will go through SAD. You will experience SAD in a literal way, seasonal affective disorder. And so I'm so grateful that I can go out in the sun. I mean, wow, as we're talking now, it's beginning to rain, which I'm glad, because I'm planting stuff on the outside, but I really want my sun. So I'm torn between wanting the rains to come and the sun. But the rain is coming now, and I'm grateful because the plants need it.
Oh, the rain in Jamaica is so different though, because it rains, but it's still warm.
Yeah.
Whereas here it rains, it's
Yeah.
dark, it's cold, the wind's licking you in your face, and it's a different. I love the rain in Jamaica. It's a beautiful feeling. So, obviously, we've kind of spoke about some of the challenges. What would you say has been kind of the highest point of your entrepreneurial journey so far? The thing that you look back and say, "Wow, that was amazing."
So I do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring and stuff. And I can tell you that the highest points for me have been when I get a feedback to say, thank you. You said this at that point and it changed my life. You did this and it changed my life. It really, there's just been so many. The moments though, when I know that I've personally affected the lives in a positive way of somebody else. I remember the first time, a couple of things too. The first time I launched my first book, and somebody commented to me that they felt like they were in the hall of a famous motivational speaker, giving their speech and so on, and it was just such a moment that impacted them. There's that. There is the moment when I opened my store, Patwa Apparel, and all the support, all the cameras on the TV station, and then there have been a few others, just having the podcast and getting persons who, from any intents and purposes, then you wouldn't imagine that I would be able to speak with these persons back in the day. And here I am having these amazing folks on the podcast and sharing their inspiration, people that I've, for the most part, listened to over a long time, and know I'm actually having conversations with them. For me, that is huge.
Mm-hmm. It is huge. Your Lisa Nichols episode had me in tears. I was bawling.
Yeah, I bawled too, and I'm like, who does that? Who cries on their,
I loved it, but also it showed the authenticity. And I think sometimes in this kind of podcast world, it's very business, it's very strategic, and sometimes people kind of make it a bit robotic.
Human.
Yeah. So I love that there was the human factor, and what a phenomenal interview it was. Well done, because it totally blew me away. And we haven't really spoke much about Patwa Apparel. So tell us more. And one of the things that I love asking about people that have product-based businesses is I'm used to service-based businesses. All of my businesses has been in the service space, but I do want to develop products, and I'm actually in the process of developing some products now. How did the process of building that business differ from your kind of more service-based business?
Okay, so I think the service business kind of unfold and took on lives of their own, in that it was like a natural progression from the physical business, in terms of, all right, I'm searching for my identity here. Who am I? And it kind of led me into that path. Whereas the product-based business was something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to do a business, a product. I think it was, we would have, I've thought about doing service-based, like restaurants and spas and other things, but eventually what came to me was to do this product-based business. And for me, it was like I had it made, because I had worked in an organization where I was a purchasing person there, but I had opportunity to interact with marketers and so on. So I knew what it was like to take on a new product, what was involved in getting the costing done, going to source for vendors, and all of these things that make it, interesting and make it possible. So I was able to do that. And I prepared a lot more for that, in the sense that, okay, I was doing the costing and doing all of these things and all the tangible and the physical things. But like I said, too, the service-based business was more of me finding my own, and this is what I want to do eventually, because I've always dreamt of speaking globally, always dreamt of writing books, And so when those started happening, like, yes, I'm living the dream that I've always had.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that. I love that you have business in different spaces, because often people will stay in one lane and you've navigated both. And I think that's quite impressive. Question. When you think of your life in 10 years' time, what do you envision for yourself and for your businesses?
Okay, so in 10 years' time, I would have published a book traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of my dreams, not just to self-publish, but to publish a book, getting a publisher, give me,
That cash
some,
advance.
yes, and all of these things. And I would have done my TED Talk, perhaps more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, those are two things that I want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting nothing more on my bucket list right now. I'm living a life. I feel like I'm living a life of a retiree, but that's where I'm at right now. Just continue to maintain and service my clients and continue to have more impact and meaning in what I do.
Mm-hmm. Who is your support system? Who do you go to for support, and how comfortable are you
fundamentally, it's my faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
Family members, a few family members and a few friends, my husband. That's it. I'm somebody who looks a lot deep within.
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally that's it. I look inwards a lot. So I'm a lot of, I do a lot of quiet time, always introspecting and finding and make sure that I'm fully grounded and I'm anchored.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about faith, and I've heard you speak about faith and kind of read Psalms, etc. on your podcast. I know that some people kind of shy away from expressing their faith because they think it might have a negative impact on their audience. What are your views on that?
Right. So for me, I believe that, I don't necessarily want to go on the podcast preaching because persons are not coming for that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, my faith is one of the biggest parts of who I am. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it has to come out. No, I give you an example. When I was going through that severe period of illness, and part of the idea of stopping the podcast did occur to me. I even got to the point where I say, when I got to 200 episodes, I'm going to call it quits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like my spirit was saying to me, like the Spirit of God was saying to me, no, you're going to use your podcast as a way to be part of the Great Commission, or, which is go therefore into the world. I'm like, how am I going to do that without preaching? And because that can be a turnoff, right? People are coming to something and they're hearing faith, especially if you're not believers, it can be a turnoff. And I'm very mindful of that. So strategy is important. And so I would normally close the podcast with a Zig Ziglar quote, you were born to win, something like that. I don't even remember it now. It's been so long since I've used it. And I started doing that since I started on radio, which is 2014. So, it stayed with me. But then it's like the Spirit of God was like to me, why not share a Bible verse, a point of hope? Because particularly too at that time, when I thought of it, people were going through a rough time. The pandemic was scary and frightening for a lot of people. There was a lot of confusion. People needed hope. And so I started to share that, point of hope. And I've gotten feedback like, wow, I'm really pleasantly surprised and blessed because I never expected to hear this on a business podcast, but I like it. And I know that it has been impactful for some persons. And I use my story so I can share my faith without sharing my faith. You know what I mean? And that's what I've been doing because, again, I'm very mindful of my audience, but at the same time, I have to share every part of me in an authentic way. Mm-hmm. And I do that without being salesy and say, hey, come on, you have to be a part of this faith. No, you're going to see my reaction, my interaction. You're going to see who I am shining through. And that can impact somebody else, into making changes and into doing things that that the faith would require.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way you do it. I agree with you. It's not salesy. It's not that you have to come and join, but it is also very powerful. And I like to hear it.
Yeah.
Personally. And as usual, I've spoken more than I should have. And it's gone longer than the time that I've prepared, as I knew it would. But let's try it. I'm going to try and wind it down before I start asking 10,000 other questions. 3 pieces of advice that you would give to somebody that's listening, that's in the early stages of starting their business or wants to start a business. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to that person?
So number 1, know what you want and why you want it.
Mm-hmm.
because and particularly your why. Deep search deep within. Each time, why are you doing this? You come with an answer. Why that answer? You peel back the onions, perhaps the onion even 10 layers back, right? To get to that core. Because when illness comes, when frustration comes, when whatever the challenges comes, if you are not grounded in your why, you will be forced to give up. You will want to give up because there's nothing anchoring you that is bigger than you. Find something that is bigger than you. Once you've done that, don't be in a hurry to get to the destination, because the journey is the destination. The journey to destination. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the small wins. Process the things that are not wins in your mind, but enjoy the journey. And finally, I want to say, in your lane. And by sticking in your lane, I don't mean that you're not trying to try new things, or you shouldn't try new things, but don't be looking over your shoulders as to what your neighbor is doing or to what somebody else is doing, because that will only breed frustration, because you're never going to be able to keep up. Somebody else is always going to be doing better than you. Somebody else is going to appear to do better than you, right? Appearance is not always real. You're in the UK. I like the British comedy Keeping Up Appearances. It's one of my favorite. And Miss T is always trying to keep up, and it is frightening. It is frustrating. You can't always, I like to say, water your own lawn. If you think your neighbor's lawn is green, water your own lawn so yours can be green too. Right? Stay in your lane. There's not much traffic there at all, and those are my 3 pieces of advice. And I wish your community well. I wish you well, Danielle, and I really thank you for the opportunity to be here and to have this candid conversation.
Thank you. I still have one more question though. She's the Boss recommends a book, a podcast, a film, all 3 or 1 or 3 of one of them that you want to share with the audience that has made an impact on your life. I think that's also really important.
Oh, an impact on my life. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So at different stages. So I can share somebody I lent my Rich Dad Poor Dad to somebody and I never got it back. They claim it was lost. I have to get one for keepsake. But the books in the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. So before you retire, before you quit your job, retire young, retire rich, and there are others, right? But certainly the original Rich Dad Poor Dad is amazing, and it changed my mindset on business and what it means to have money and all of these things. So that's a great book that I would recommend, and that helped me to kind of form a perspective on entrepreneurship. As well as quite recently, I interviewed Seth Godin for the second time, and this time we discussed his latest book, The Practice: Shipping Creative Work. And it's just almost a mantra to say, just do it. Just do it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Don't wait for your best work to come. Just do it. Just ship it. Ship the work, whatever the work is. If you're an author, you don't become an author because you're writing. You write and you become an author, right? So that is just the idea in The Practice. I will leave that with you. And of course, in terms of a podcast too, I like the one that inspired me to actually start, which is Entrepreneurs on Fire by Lee Dumas. There's so many other things I could recommend, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. And obviously your podcast, please give it a plug, and your books.
Yes, the Entrepreneurial You, right? How could I forget? So the Entrepreneurial You podcast. I know as at this time we have just posted Lisa Nichols, 1 week ago, posted Lisa Nichols' episode. And then there's an episode with Jeffrey Shaw. And that episode was, it was amazing. It was interesting simply because we discussed some things that we didn't have it in our intention to discuss, but then it became very personal. And Jeffrey shared about his homosexual journey and all of that. So that, and as somebody who has different beliefs, and to be able to have that conversation and an open, honest conversation to hear somebody's points of view and how that, relates and ties into his entrepreneurial journey. That was interesting. And I think that's one of my most, my favorite conversations of all the over 200 I've done. So there's an Entrepreneurial You. You can find it where you get your podcast, or simply go to henekawatkisporter.com. If you further want to reach out to me for other things, that's where you go. There's a WhatsApp icon on the website that you can reach out to me for coaching, for podcast production, or be part of my mastermind, or even to get the book, Podcast Power, the quick start guide to launching and leveling up your brand. I really appreciate your time that you took to listen to me, and for you, Daniela, for inviting me on. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And you answered my last question, which was, where can people find you? Just because you're a professional, you know how this thing works. So you share. But thank you so much. It's been such a joy talking to you. I know that the audience is going to get great value, because I know that I've got great value. So thank you so much. And for those of you watching, listening, please, as usual, make sure that you like. Please make sure that you share with your networks. If there's somebody that you feel is going to get value from this conversation, make sure that you share. And if there's anything, which I'm sure there is, that Heneka has said that has really impacted you, write a comment. It's good to know that you guys are engaging with the content. I have people come up to me in the streets and send me messages to say, oh, I've listened to this and it's really had an impact on me, but don't write on the comments. So please write on the comments. And I will take heed of my own advice and do it for you too, Heneka, because I listen, but then I don't do it. And as usual, guys, make sure that you hit that subscribe and follow button. And if you are in the process of trying to grow your business, get in touch. Visit www.she'sthebossintl.com. I offer a wide range of services in the area of coaching, consultancy, and training that can really help you start to grow, to build a profitable, sustainable, systems-driven business, because we're trying to build businesses that are not reliant on us. So we need to rely on the systems and the processes. And if you need any assistance with that, please check out my website and get in touch. I will catch you next week, Sunday at 8, with another She's the Boss female entrepreneur story. And Heneka, once again, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.